"Say hello to the sharks for me," Victoria whispered in my ear. Her voice had a sweetness that chilled my blood just before I felt her cold hand shove hard between my shoulder blades. I stumbled, felt the sea wind slice against my skin, then dropped straight into the black water of Chesapeake Bay. In that terrible moment, I caught the eyes of my only son, David. He stood frozen, neither saving me nor speaking, just watching his mother sink. Salt water flooded my mouth, its bitterness mixing with a pain nothing could match. The supposed recovery cruise was only the opening act of betrayal. In that knife-cold water, I swore that if I lived, I would teach them what real fear feels like. The worst pain wasn't the frigid water cutting through my clothes, dragging me down. No, it was the look in my son's eyes as he watched me fall. Not horror, not regret, just empty acceptance. My David, my only child. The boy I had nursed through fevers, taught to read, encouraged through college. Now a stranger watching his mother die. I am Margaret Williams, and this is the story of how I died and was reborn to reclaim justice. Would you do the same if your family betrayed you? How far would you go to right such a terrible wrong? The morning before it happened, Maryland's sunshine spilled through my bedroom windows. I had just finished 6 weeks of recovery after hip replacement surgery. When David called, I took it as a good sign. "Mom, we want to take you out on the yacht today. Celebrate your recovery. Just the three of us like old times." His voice sounded warm. It had been a long time since he called me without asking for money or business advice. I said yes right away, partly because I missed him, partly because I craved feeling needed. I chose my favorite navy dress, the color Harold used to say made my eyes brighter. I spritzed a little light perfume and tied on the silk scarf he left me before cancer took him 2 years ago. In the mirror, I saw an older woman, but still steady, still believing. I thought maybe, after Harold passed, David had finally changed. Maybe my son truly wanted to reconnect. I was that naive. I had spent 40 years as a high school principal before retiring. I built a reputation for seeing through teenage lies and schemes. Yet my own son fooled me completely. Perhaps we see what we want to see in those we love. The desire for connection can blind us to the most obvious warning signs. Harold and I had built a life of service and achievement. He created Williams Tech from our garage, developing medical software that revolutionized patient care in hospitals across America. I dedicated my life to education, becoming principal of Lincoln High School, turning one of the worst-performing schools in Baltimore into a model of academic excellence. We worked hard, saved wisely, and built a fortune neither of us had ever imagined possible. David grew up watching us work. As a child, he would sit in Harold's office playing with spare computer parts while his father coded late into the night. During summers, he would visit me at school, helping organize books in the library or repaint classroom walls. We thought we were teaching him the value of hard work, the importance of building something meaningful. Now I wondered what lessons he had actually learned. When I reached the marina, I saw Margaret's legacy carved on the side of the sleek white yacht. I had never given permission for that name. The yacht had been Harold's pride, not mine. Harold Williams had built Williams Tech from our garage, transforming it into a medical software company worth billions. The yacht was his one indulgence. Now it bore my name without my consent. The morning was perfect for sailing. Clear blue skies stretched above the water, glistened with sunlight, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of salt and possibility. Under different circumstances, it would have been idyllic. Instead, as I approached the dock, I felt an inexplicable heaviness in my chest, a warning I chose to ignore. David opened his arms as I stepped aboard. "Mom, you look beautiful today. You need to relax more often." His hug felt cold, missing the weight of real affection. Victoria stood behind him. Designer sunglasses, dark red lipstick, a smile sharp as a blade. "You look wonderful, Margaret. I'll make you a mimosa, something special for today." I thanked her, though my heart dipped. Victoria had always been perfectly polite, perfectly groomed, and perfectly impossible to know. She worked marketing at a competitor's firm when she met David. Harold had warned me about her. "That woman wants the Williams name, not our son," he'd said. I had defended her then, wanting David to be happy. Another mistake to add to my growing collection. As Victoria disappeared into the cabin to prepare drinks, I took a moment to look around the yacht. Everything gleamed, meticulously maintained. Harold had always insisted on excellence in all things. "Quality isn't expensive," he used to say, "it's priceless." The yacht was a testament to that philosophy, every detail considered, every surface immaculate. David began adjusting the lines, preparing to set sail. I watched him, remembering how Harold had taught him to sail when he was just 10 years old. Those summer days on the bay had been some of our happiest as a family. David learning to read the wind, Harold patiently explaining navigation, me preparing picnic lunches they would devour after hours on the water. When had those memories faded for David? When had money become more important than love? Sometimes your body knows danger before your mind accepts it. As the yacht pulled away and the engine hummed beneath us, I felt a heaviness in my stomach that wasn't just the gentle rocking of the boat. The water shimmered silver around us, peaceful and vast. I leaned back into the leather seat sea breeze, lifting my mostly gray hair. Everything was calm. Too calm. Victoria returned with drinks, handing me a mimosa in a crystal flute. "Drink up, Margaret. It's a celebration." I noticed how her phone sat on the table camera angled toward me, not for a selfie, but recording my every move. When she thought I wasn't looking, she adjusted it slightly, ensuring I remained in frame. Why would she need video of her mother-in-law enjoying a boat ride? "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I said deliberately, not touching the drink. "Reminds me of when David was young and we'd spend every weekend out on the water with Harold." Victoria smiled tightly. "David has told me so many stories about those days." "Has he?" I looked at my son. "Which ones are your favorites to tell David?" He hesitated just a fraction too long. "All of them, Mom. Those were good times." The non-answer hung in the air between us. The David I raised would have immediately launched into the story about capsizing the small sailboat when he was 12, or the time we spotted a pod of dolphins off the eastern shore. This man before me was a stranger wearing my son's face. David began talking about financial matters, his voice too practiced. "Mom, we've been thinking about how to simplify everything. You shouldn't worry about assets at your age. The younger generation should handle management." Victoria nodded, pouring more champagne into my barely touched glass. "You don't need the hassle of paperwork and accounts, Margaret. Let us take care of everything." I kept my voice even. "I'm still clear enough to sign my own checks, Victoria." She smiled, eyes like needles. "Of course, Margaret. It's just sometimes people don't realize they're starting to forget the little things." A chill ran down my spine. I set my glass down carefully, watching her phone still recording. They were building a narrative. A story about an elderly woman with failing faculties. A woman who needed to be managed. A woman whose signature on papers transferring her assets wouldn't be questioned if she were to have an unfortunate accident. "What do you mean by forgetting the little things?" I asked, making direct eye contact with her. "I'd like you to be specific." Victoria exchanged a quick glance with David. "Just general observations. You seemed confused about your medication schedule last month when I visited." "I wasn't confused," I said calmly. "I questioned why you were rearranging my pill bottles when my system has worked perfectly for years." David interjected, his tone forcefully casual. "Mom, no one's saying anything's wrong. We just want to help before anything becomes an issue." I looked at my son, this man I had carried inside my body, had nursed at my breast, had taught to tie his shoes and write his name. When had he learned to lie so smoothly? When had money become more valuable to him than his mother's life? Harold and I had spent decades building something valuable together. He had been the inventor, the dreamer. I had been the practical one, managing the finances, handling the business side, while also raising David and running my school. After Harold died, our attorney explained that he had left controlling interest of the company and most assets to me, with provisions for David to inherit when I passed. At the time, I thought Harold was being overly cautious about our son's business acumen. Now, on this boat, with the endless water surrounding us, I understood Harold's wisdom. Since Harold died, subtle changes had occurred around me. My longtime financial advisor stopped returning calls. My personal attorney, Clarice Nolan, once Harold's close friend, became mysteriously unavailable. Bank notifications started going to David instead of me. Small changes easily explained away. But together they formed a pattern I had been too trusting to see. I want to go back and, I said firmly, rising from my seat. I'm tired. David glanced at Victoria, then said flatly, "No, Mom, you need to hear us out." I looked straight at him. "You're scaring me." Victoria slid closer, voice honeyed but rehearsed. "We just want to be sure everything's in order. You know how messy legal stuff gets if anything happens." "What are you implying?" "Nothing at all, Margaret." She smiled. "Just that when the time comes, it's better if someone can sign for you." My hand trembled, but anger surged through me. I suddenly saw everything clearly. The mimosa likely drugged, the phone recording evidence of my confusion, the isolated location. They had been building a wall around me for months, cutting me off from anyone who might help. I searched David's eyes for a trace of the boy I'd raised, the child who once made me Mother's Day cards with glitter that got everywhere, the teenager who cried on my shoulder after his first heartbreak, the young man who stood proud at his college graduation. Nothing remained, only cold calculation. "I want to go ashore now," I repeated, moving toward the cabin. David's voice dropped cold as the water around us. "You're not going anywhere." Victoria came closer, and in that exact moment she whispered the line that shoved me to the edge of life and death. "Say hello to the sharks." The push wasn't hard, but it was enough to throw me off balance. A heartbeat later, I dropped off the deck. Water exploded around me, salt burning my eyes and mouth like needles. In that split moment before going under, I saw them on the deck, David faking panic, Victoria clutching her chest, putting on shock. Then they turned away. I kicked, but the dress and shoes dragged me down. My head spun hips, screaming in pain from the surgery, but survival instinct took over. Harold and I had swum every morning in this bay for 20 years. He used to say, "The ocean doesn't kill you, Margaret, fear does." I held my breath, kicked hard, and aimed toward a distant light, some small fishing boat. Every yard felt like fire burning through my lungs, but I didn't stop. The face of my son kept appearing before me, those empty eyes showing no love, only relief. The water was frigid despite the warm day, a shock to my system that both hurt and helped. The cold numbed the pain in my hip while simultaneously sharpening my mind. I fought against the weight of my waterlogged clothes, against the current, trying to pull me further from shore, against the disbelief that my own flesh and blood had done this to me. With each stroke, memories flashed before me. David as a toddler, his small hand in mine as we walked through our neighborhood. David at 8, proudly showing off the computer program he'd created with Harold's help. David at 16, sullen and rebellious, pushing against the high expectations his father set. David at his wedding, handsome in his tuxedo, looking at Victoria with such hope and love. Had it all been a lie, or had something fundamental changed in him? When had money become more important than the mother who had given him life, who had cheered at every baseball game, who had stayed up all night helping him prepare for college interviews? I broke the surface, coughing and gasping. "Help somebody!" My voice came out hoarse and weak against the vastness of the night sea. A flashlight swept my way from the distant boat. A rough male voice barked, "Holy hell! Someone's in the water! Hold that line! Pull her up!" I grabbed the rope they threw, and sunburned arms hauled me onto a rough wooden deck. I collapsed, shaking so hard my bones rattled. The smells of salt motor oil and gasoline smoke became the sweetest sense of survival. A weathered man threw a blanket around me. His face was lined with years of sun and wind, his hands calloused from a lifetime of work on the water. Behind him stood a teenage girl, her eyes wide with concern. "Ma'am, what happened? Where'd you fall from?" the man asked. I opened my mouth, breath-ragged voice shaking. "Don't call the Coast Guard. Let them think I'm dead." He held my gaze more than surprised. Something like compassion crossed his face. "Name's Walter. Walter Johnson," he said quietly. "People usually say that when they're running from the devil." I nodded. "Not the devil. My own blood." Walter exchanged a glance with the girl. "This is my granddaughter, Zoe. We'll get you warmed up, then figure out next steps." Have you ever had a moment when everything you believed about your life shattered in an instant? When you realized the people closest to you were strangers wearing familiar faces? Walter's fishing boat had a small cabin where Zoe brought me hot tea. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the cup. The girl watched me with curious, kind eyes. "Drink," she urged. "It's cold out there. You could have died." "That was the plan," I said, my voice still raw from salt water. Walter studied me from the doorway. His eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen much of life's darkness, but chosen to remain kind anyway. "Lady, I've been on these waters 40 years, seen folks fall off boats, but never met someone who didn't want to be found after." I looked up at him. "My name is Margaret Williams. My son and his wife pushed me off that yacht. They want me declared dead so they can take everything." Zoe gasped, but Walter just nodded slowly. "I was in Vietnam. Saw the worst people can do, but family turning on family?" He shook his head. "That's a special kind of evil." I wrapped the blanket tighter, feeling every one of my 68 years. I need somewhere to stay, somewhere they won't look. "I know a place," Walter said. "Woman named Elena Rodriguez runs a little inn called Harbor Light. She doesn't ask questions." As we approached the shore, I watched distant lights of other boats. One of them might be Margaret's legacy, returning to harbor David and Victoria, preparing their story about the tragic accident. The grieving son, the supportive daughter-in-law, the confused elderly woman who slipped over the rail. I tried to imagine what they were saying to each other. Were they celebrating their success? Was Victoria reassuring David that they had done the right thing? Or was there perhaps a flicker of regret in my son's heart, some small ember of the child I had raised still alive within the man who had betrayed me? Walter's boat cut through the dark water, the engine a steady heartbeat beneath us. Zoe sat beside me, her young face thoughtful. "My grandmother had Alzheimer's," she said suddenly. "Is that what they're saying about you, that you're confused?" I nodded, surprised by her perception. "That's what people do," she said with the startling clarity of youth. "When they want to take control from old people, they say they can't remember things, can't make decisions, even when it's not true." "When did you get so wise?" I asked. She shrugged. "I listen, and I watch. People don't notice teenagers much." Walter guided the boat into a small sheltered cove away from the main marina. "We'll dock here, less chance of being seen." Lena's Inn was a weathered 2-story building with faded blue paint and window boxes full of geraniums. She opened the door at Walter's knock, taking in my soaked clothes and haunted expression without comment. She was about my age, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a practical bun and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "She needs shelter," Walter said simply. "Pays cash." Elena nodded. "Second-floor room at the end of the hall. Bathroom has hot water. I'll bring towels and dry clothes." In that small bathroom with peeling wallpaper, I stood under the scalding shower, watching salt water and tears circle the drain. My body ached, especially my healing hip, but I was alive. I looked at my reflection in the cloudy mirror. Gray hair plastered to my headlines etched deeper around my eyes, a bruise forming on my shoulder where Victoria had pushed me. I had died tonight. The trusting, naive Margaret Williams had drowned in Chesapeake Bay. The woman looking back at me was someone else entirely, someone harder, someone who would not rest until justice was served. Elena had left clean clothes outside the bathroom door, a simple cotton nightgown, worn but clean, and a thick robe. I dressed, then made my way downstairs. The inn was quiet, just a small sitting area with mismatched furniture and a tiny reception desk. Elena sat in an armchair reading glasses perched on her nose as she worked on a crossword puzzle. She looked up as I entered. "Feeling better? Cleaners," I said. "Not better." She nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Sit. I'll make tea." Elena disappeared into what I assumed was the kitchen, returning minutes later with a tray bearing a teapot, 2 mugs, and a plate of simple butter cookies. "Walter told me a little," she said, pouring the steaming tea, "but I'd like to hear from you if you're willing to share." So I told her everything, about Harold's death 2 years ago, about the subtle changes afterward, the gradual isolation as David and Victoria took control of more aspects of my life. the yacht trip, the push into dark water. Elena listened without interruption, her face betraying nothing but quiet attention. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "They will move quickly now. With you presumed dead, they'll want to secure everything before questions arise." "What can I do?" I asked. "I have no proof. It would be my word against theirs, and they've already painted me as confused and forgetful." "First you rest," Elena said firmly. "Tomorrow we think. Tomorrow we plan." That night I lay in the narrow bed listening to the distant sound of waves against the shore. Sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's face as I felt that blank acceptance of my death. I saw Victoria's perfectly manicured hand pushing me over the edge. I saw my life disappearing beneath dark water. How had I missed the signs? There had been so many looking back. The way Victoria always seemed to be documenting my bad days on her phone. The financial documents David had tried to get me to sign, claiming they were routine updates, but which I now suspected were transfers of authority. The new doctors they had insisted I see, who always seemed more interested in my mental state than my physical health. The next morning, I borrowed Elena's laptop and typed my name into the search engine. Headlines flooded the screen. Tech billionaire Margaret Williams missing after yacht accident. Family fears worst as search continues for widow of tech pioneer. Williams, tech shares fluctuate as company leadership uncertain. The most disturbing headline appeared in the local paper. Missing woman showed signs of cognitive decline, family reports. They had been planning this for months, building a narrative of an elderly woman losing her faculties, setting the stage so no one would question when I disappeared, and David took control of everything Harold and I had built. I kept scrolling, my stomach turning, when I found a photo from my birthday last year. I remembered that night clearly. I had been exhausted from organizing a charity event, had one glass of wine too many, and looked dazed when cameras flashed. The caption read, "Williams is believed to have been experiencing early-stage Alzheimer's, raising family concerns about competency." A complete fabrication. I had never been diagnosed with any cognitive impairment. My doctors had always remarked on my sharp mind. But who would question the grieving family of a woman who had vanished at sea? There was a statement from Victoria quoted in the Baltimore Sun. "My mother-in-law was the strongest woman I knew, but age catches up with all of us. We were trying to make her final years peaceful and dignified while respecting her independence. This tragic accident happened despite our best efforts to keep her safe. The perfect grieving daughter-in-law, the caring family trying to balance respect with protection. It was masterfully done. They hadn't just wanted my money, they wanted to erase me from the world as if I had never existed." Elena found me still at the computer, tears streaming down my face. "They're saying I was losing my mind," I whispered. "That I was confused, forgetful. It's all lies." Elena sat beside me, her hand warm on my shoulder. "Of course it's lies, but lies with a purpose. They needed to establish doubt about your competence before your accident. Makes the story neater." "How do I fight this?" I asked. "How do I prove I'm alive without putting myself in danger again?" "Carefully," Elena said. "Very carefully, and not alone." She studied me for a moment. "You need allies, people they won't expect, people they don't know about." 2 days later, the search was called off. The papers reported that the Coast Guard believed no one could have survived that long in the water. Victoria gave a tearful interview perfectly dressed in tasteful black, describing how I had seemed confused before my tragic accident. I sat in my room at Elena's newspaper, trembling in my hands. Below the headlines was a photo of David and Victoria holding hands, heads bowed, looking like two souls shattered by grief. They had nailed their roles. "I need to see it," I told Elena that morning. "The funeral. I need to witness it with my own eyes." Elena looked concerned, but nodded. "Sometimes to survive, you have to look straight at the people burying you." She lent me a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses. Walter drove me to Oak Ridge Cemetery, where I stood beneath an oak tree far enough away that no one would recognize me. The day was overcast clouds hanging heavy with unspilled rain. About 30 people gathered around the open grave. In the center, David gripped Victoria's hand, his head lowered. Victoria dabbed at dry eyes with a pristine white handkerchief. The minister spoke about a great woman taken too soon by illness and accident. I stood watching my heartbeat steady and even. It's a strange thing to watch your own burial while you're still breathing. I studied each face in the crowd, noting who was present and who was absent. Harold's old friends from the early days of the company, a few former colleagues from my school, neighbors. But conspicuously missing were 3 key people: Richard Chen, my financial advisor, Diane Torres, the original trust attorney, and Michelle Green, the bank controller who approved all asset transfers. Too neat to be coincidence. These 3 would have been the ones to question the rapid transfer of assets after my death. Their absence told me they were either complicit or had been removed from the equation. As the ceremony concluded, David stepped forward to place a bouquet of white lilies on the empty casket. My breath caught. White lilies had been Harold's favorite. He had brought them to me on our first date on our wedding day on the day David was born. Using them now felt like a final desecration of our family's memories. Victoria placed her hand on David's back, a gesture that would appear comforting to observers. But from my position, I could see her fingers digging into his jacket, controlling, not consoling. Her head turned slightly, and for a moment I swore she looked directly at my hiding place. A small, sharp smile flickered across her face before she resumed her mask of grief. After everyone had gone, I moved closer, my steps quiet as a ghost. The new stone bore my name, Margaret E. Williams, 1957, 2025, beloved mother, educator, visionary. I read each word, then let out a small, bitter laugh. Beloved mother. They had chosen that line to convince everyone the family bond had been intact. No one would suspect a beloved mother had been murdered by her own son. I placed a single white rose on the wet soil, not for the deceased, but for myself, for the woman just reborn. I'm not dead, I whispered to the empty grave, and soon everyone will know the truth. That evening I shared everything with Elena. She listened without interruption, then said, "In this town there's a name people mention when they want things done clean and fast. Alexis Morgan, an attorney who specializes in asset transfers, trusts, and expedited inheritance." The name landed like a puzzle piece snapping into place. I remembered seeing the initials AM at the end of several documents David had asked me to sign months ago. Documents I had refused, sensing something wrong. "I need help," I said. "Someone I can trust completely." Elena thought for a moment. "There's someone you should meet. Josephine Parker. Everyone calls her Jo, retired police detective. If anyone can help you navigate this, it's her." The next morning, Elena arranged for me to meet Josephine at a small coffee shop 2 towns over. I sat in the corner booth, hat pulled low, heart pounding, as the door opened and a tall black woman in her 70s entered. Her hair was silver-cropped close to her head, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had spent decades commanding respect. She scanned the room, eyes settling on me. For a moment she froze, then walked slowly to my table. "They said I was meeting an old friend," she said cautiously, "but you're supposed to be dead, Margaret Williams." "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated," I replied, removing my sunglasses. Josephine studied me, then slid into the booth. "I read about the accident. The whole town's talking about it." "It wasn't an accident. My son and his wife tried to kill me." I expected disbelief, but Josephine just nodded slowly. "I worked homicide for 30 years, honey. Half the murders I solved were family affairs. Question is, why are you telling me? Because I need someone who understands how to build a case. Someone who knows the law but isn't part of the system that failed me. Elena says you're that person." Josephine's eyes softened. "Margaret, we've never met, but I know who you are. You ran Lincoln High when my daughter attended. Changed her life with that college prep program. She's a doctor now." "Tanya Parker," I recalled. "Brilliant girl, always asking questions no one else thought to ask." "That's her. She's at Johns Hopkins now." Josephine leaned forward. "Tell me everything start to finish. Leave nothing out." For the next hour, I recounted every detail. The gradual isolation after Harold's death, the subtle changes in access to my accounts, the yacht trip, the push into dark water. Josephine listened intently, occasionally jotting notes in a small, leather-bound notebook. When I finished, Josephine was silent for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. Her palm was warm, calloused from decades of work. "Maggie, I've seen a lot of evil in my time, but what your son and his wife did—" She shook her head. "This isn't just murder. This is calculated, premeditated. And they're not done." "What do you mean?" "If they went to this much trouble to get rid of you, they'll have a backup plan in case something went wrong. We need to find out what it is before they implement it." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my grandson Marcus, best private investigator in Maryland. Used to be FBI before he got tired of the politics." While Josephine made the call, I stared out the window at people passing by. Normal people living normal lives. People who trusted their families. People who didn't know how quickly everything could be taken away. Have you ever lost everything in an instant? Your home, your identity, your family. What would you do to get justice? With Josephine's help, we formulated a plan. First, we needed evidence of the conspiracy. That meant returning to the place I once called home. 3 nights later, I stood across the street from my house, the Grand Colonial, where Harold and I had lived for 40 years. Where we had raised David, hosted dinner parties, built a life. Now it glowed with warm light from within, but I was outside a stranger. "You sure about this?" Josephine asked, standing beside me. I nodded, clutching the old key David had never asked me to return. "They think I'm dead. They won't be expecting a ghost." We waited until after midnight. The street was silent, houses dark. I approached from the back through the garden I had tended for decades. The roses were neglected now, already withering without my care. The key slid into the lock with a quiet click. Inside the house was cold and too pristine, not abandoned but maintained differently. The hallway rug had no dust. The furniture was rearranged. The air carried Victoria's expensive perfume. I moved like a shadow through the living room. The family photos had been changed. Our wedding portrait was gone, replaced by pictures of David and Victoria. Every trace of me erased as if they were test driving a life without me. I stopped at Harold's office door. It had always been his sanctuary where he worked late into the night on his inventions. After his death, I had preserved it exactly as he left it. Now the door was ajar, light spilling out. I pushed it open. The room had been transformed. Harold's old desk remained, but now it was covered with papers, files, and a laptop. The walls were plastered with notes, a whiteboard filled with writing, and in the center a thick file stamped in bold letters, "Project Margaret Phase 3 Accident." My hands trembled as I opened it. In the dim light, I could make out Victoria's handwriting. "Observation patient confused about dates, forgets medications, record on video, add sedatives to nighttime dosage. Prepare petition for declaration of incapacity. AM approved." Those initials, again, AM, Alexis Morgan. And at the bottom, a full signature, Alexis Morgan Escuman. I used the small camera Josephine had given me to photograph every page. Each click of the shutter felt like counting down to something inevitable. My hands shook with anger and disbelief as I documented their betrayal. Page after page revealed a methodical plan to destroy me, not just physically, but to erase my identity, my dignity, my very existence. They had tracked my every move, noted conversations out of context, created a fiction of a woman losing her grip on reality. It was monstrous in its detail, its calculation. The whiteboard was divided into 4 columns. Phase 1, create medical profile. Completed Phase 2, secure asset authority. Completed Phase 3, boating accident. Completed Phase 4, court declares incapacity, finalize inheritance. In process, David had written at the bottom, must complete before audit committee intervenes. I sank into Harold's chair, overwhelmed. This wasn't just an impulsive act of greed. This was a calculated long-term plan to destroy me piece by piece, to take not just my money, but my dignity, my very existence. As I prepared to leave, a sound from upstairs froze me in place, a baby's cry, thin and insistent. A baby. David and Victoria didn't have children. They had always said they were focused on careers, not family. The crying continued and I heard footsteps overhead, then Victoria's voice. "She's up again. When will she settle? It's been 3 weeks and she still isn't on a schedule." 3 weeks. I did the math. 3 weeks since my accident. Since I supposedly drowned. Cold flooded my veins. They weren't just taking assets. They had a child no one knew about. Why keep a baby secret unless there was something wrong about how they got it? I backed away from the office, heart pounding. I needed to get out before they discovered me, but the mystery of this child pulled at me. Who was this baby? Where had it come from? And why the secrecy around its existence? I moved silently toward the stairs, drawn by the soft crying. The sound came from the master bedroom, my old room where Harold and I had slept for decades. I crept up the stairs, careful to avoid the third step that always creaked. The door to the bedroom was partially open. Through the gap, I could see Victoria pacing a small bundle in her arms. The room had been completely redecorated, all traces of my life, with Harold erased. "Shh," Victoria was saying, not with tenderness, but with irritation. "You need to be quiet. We can't have the neighbors asking questions." The baby's cries subsided to whimpers. Victoria laid her in a bassinet near the window, then checked her phone. She texted something, waited for a response, then whispered to herself, "Good, she'll be here tomorrow." Who would be here? Another piece of the puzzle I couldn't yet see. I backed away from the door, then down the stairs, careful to make no sound. My mind raced with questions. A secret baby appearing exactly when I died. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Somehow this child was part of their plan. I slipped out through the back door, locking it behind me. The night air felt cleaner after the suffocating atmosphere of the house. I made my way through the garden, past the rose bushes Harold had planted for our 30th anniversary, past the bench where we used to sit and watch the sunset. Josephine waited in her car down the block. I slid into the passenger seat, my hands still trembling. "Did you get what you needed?" she asked. "That and more," I said. "They have a baby, Joe, a 3-week-old baby no one knows about." "A baby?" Josephine's eyebrows rose. "That's unexpected." "And suspicious," I added. "Why would they hide a pregnancy? Why would the baby appear exactly when I disappeared? It's connected somehow, I know it." "We'll figure it out," Josephine assured me. My grandson Marcus is the best at digging up secrets. If there's something to find about that baby, he'll find it. As we drove away from what used to be my home, I looked back one last time. The house stood elegant and imposing against the night sky, lights glowing from within, a picture of affluence and stability. But I knew the truth now. Inside those walls was corruption, betrayal, and secrets yet to be uncovered. I had died in that house, the trusting woman I once was, drowned in Chesapeake Bay. But something new had been born, a woman with nothing left to lose. A woman determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. What would you do if you discovered your family's betrayal went deeper than you ever imagined? Would you run and save yourself? Or would you fight to expose the truth, no matter the cost? The morning after my midnight visit to my former home, I sat at Elena's kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. My mind kept returning to the baby's cry, thin and insistent, cutting through the silence of that house like an accusation. "You've been quiet," Elena said, refilling my mug with fresh hot water. "What did you find last night?" I showed her the photographs I'd taken of the Project Margaret file, the whiteboard, with its clinical phases of my elimination. Elena's face darkened as she scrolled through the images. "These people," she murmured, "so calculated." "There's something else," I said. "They have a baby, a newborn about 3 weeks old." Victoria was holding it, complaining that it wouldn't sleep through the night. Elena looked up sharply. "A baby? I thought they didn't have children." "They didn't, at least not until very recently. The timing is too perfect. This child appeared exactly when I died." Elena placed the camera on the table, her expression troubled. "In my years running this inn, I've seen people hiding from many things, abusive spouses, debt collectors, their own mistakes. But this," she shook her head, "this feels bigger than just your son and his wife." "What do you mean? The level of planning, the clinical nature of it, this Project Margaret, the timing of everything, this feels like something that's been done before." Her words sent a chill through me. Could there be others? Other elderly parents who had suffered accidents after their children became impatient for inheritance. There's a name that comes up in these files, I said. Alexis Morgan. The initials AM appear throughout the documents. She's an attorney who specializes in asset transfers and expedited inheritance. Elena nodded slowly. I've heard that name. About a year ago, there was a dispute over the estate of a wealthy retiree named James Peterson. His children claimed he had dementia and needed supervised care. His second wife insisted he was fine. The court sided with the children. A month later, James died in a household accident. The attorney who handled the case was Alexis Morgan. My stomach tightened. This isn't just about me, is it? I don't think so, Elena said. I think you've stumbled into something much larger. Have you ever felt that moment when a personal tragedy suddenly reveals itself to be part of a much bigger pattern, when your private pain connects to something systemic and terrifying? That evening, Josephine brought her grandson Marcus to Elena's inn. Marcus Parker was tall like his grandmother with the same observant eyes. But where Jo carried herself with the blunt authority of a longtime cop, Marcus moved with the quiet precision of someone used to not being noticed. I've reviewed the photos you took, Marcus said without preamble. This is professional work. The documentation, the phases, the timeline, this isn't amateur hour. Can you help me prove what they've done? I asked. Marcus exchanged a look with his grandmother. It won't be easy. They've created a solid narrative about your mental decline. The courts already consider you legally dead. And based on what I'm seeing in these files, they have medical professionals willing to testify about your supposed cognitive impairment. But it's all lies, I insisted. I know, Marcus said gently, but lies with extensive documentation become very convincing. We need to be strategic about this. He opened his laptop. First, let's map out everyone connected to this situation. On a blank document, Marcus created a diagram. In the center, he put David and Victoria. From there, he drew lines to Alexis Morgan, to the doctors mentioned in the files, to the financial advisors who had suddenly become unavailable to me. What we're looking at, he said, is a network. Not just a couple acting alone, but a coordinated effort involving multiple professionals. Josephine leaned forward. That makes this conspiracy to commit murder fraud and likely a dozen other felonies. If we can prove it, Marcus cautioned. Right now, we have photos of documents that, if challenged in court, could be claimed to be fabricated by a grieving woman with mental issues. So what do? I asked. We need more, Marcus said. More evidence, more connections, and most importantly, we need to understand about that baby, because that's the piece that doesn't fit the standard inheritance grab. I can help with that, Elena interjected. I have a friend who works at the county records office. She could check if there's any birth certificate filed recently for a Williams baby. Marcus nodded. That's a start. Meanwhile, I'll dig into Alexis Morgan's background and case history. If this is a pattern, there will be traces. What about me? I asked. I can't just sit here waiting. Actually, Josephine said, you might be our strongest asset precisely because they think you're dead. They'll be less careful, more likely to make mistakes, believing no one is watching them. I thought of David and Victoria in my home raising a mysterious child, thinking they had gotten away with my murder. The idea that they were sleeping peacefully while I was forced to hide burned inside me like acid. I want to know more about that baby, I said. Something doesn't add up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that thin cry echoing through the house that used to be mine. Why would David and Victoria suddenly have a child they had never mentioned? Why keep it secret? And why now? The next morning, Elena returned from the county records office with troubling news. There's no birth certificate filed for any baby with the last name Williams in the past 6 months, she said. But my friend mentioned something strange. She said there's been a noticeable increase in expedited birth certificate processing in the past year, all handled by the same law firm. Let me guess, I said. Morgan and Associates. Elena nodded. The very same. Marcus arrived an hour later, his expression grim. I've been looking into Alexis Morgan, he said. She's not just any attorney. Before starting her own practice, she worked for Chesapeake Family Health Institute. A health institute? I frowned. What kind? On paper, it's a fertility and family planning center. Very exclusive, very discreet. But there have been rumors about ethical concerns. Nothing proven, but enough smoke to suggest fire. Josephine joined us, bringing coffee for everyone. What kind of ethical concerns? Mostly around consent issues, Marcus said. There was an investigation 5 years ago about whether all surrogates were fully informed about medical procedures. The case was settled quietly and sealed. Surrogates, I repeated the word, hanging in the air between us. You think the baby I saw could be from a surrogate, Marcus finished. It would explain the timing, the secrecy. But why? I asked. Why would they need a surrogate baby right when they were planning to get rid of me? Josephine and Marcus exchanged a look, and suddenly I understood. An heir, I breathed. They needed an heir to the Williams fortune, a child to inherit what they couldn't legally claim themselves. It makes sense, Marcus said. David isn't the primary beneficiary of your estate, is he? I shook my head. No. Harold set up the trust so that David would receive an annual income, but the bulk of the estate would pass to our grandchildren when they reached 30. He was always concerned that David didn't have the business sense to manage the whole fortune. So, if there's no grandchild, Josephine began, then the assets remain in trust for charitable purposes, I finished. Harold was very specific about that. There's your motive for the sudden baby, Marcus said. They needed a legitimate Williams heir to unlock the full inheritance. I felt sick, not just at the calculation of it all, but at the thought of an innocent child being brought into the world as part of such a scheme. We need to look into Chesapeake Family Health Institute, I said. If that's where the baby came from, there might be records, witnesses. Marcus nodded. I'll start there. But we need to be careful. If this network is as extensive as I suspect, they'll have people watching for inquiries. For the next 3 days, we worked methodically. Marcus used his investigative skills to build profiles on everyone connected to Alexis Morgan and the Health Institute. Josephine reached out to old contacts in law enforcement, quietly asking about similar cases without revealing our specific situation. Elena kept watch for any unusual activity near the inn, and I waited, fighting against the helplessness threatening to overwhelm me. On the 4th day, Marcus returned with news that changed everything. I found something, he said, placing his laptop on the table. Security camera footage from Chesapeake Family Health Institute over the past year. He played a video showing a side entrance to a sleek, modern building. As we watched, David and Victoria appeared entering through a door marked Private Consultations. The timestamp showed it was 7 months ago. They visited the Institute multiple times, Marcus said, showing us more clips. Always through this entrance, always after regular hours. That doesn't prove anything about the baby, Josephine pointed out. No, but this might, Marcus said, pulling up another file. Financial records showing a transfer of $220,000 from an offshore account linked to Victoria to the Institute, marked as a special consultation fee. No detailed invoice, no explanation. That's an unusual amount for any medical procedure. It's payment for something they didn't want documented, I said. Exactly, Marcus agreed. And here's where it gets interesting. I tracked down a former nurse who worked at the Institute until about a month ago. She's willing to talk to us. Why would she risk that? Elena asked. Because she quit after something happened that disturbed her deeply. Something involving a patient named Jenny Lewis. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Marcus said, it made it clear this was significant. Who is Jenny Lewis? I asked. That's what we need to find out, Marcus said. The nurse Sarah Reynolds will meet us tomorrow morning. That night, I dreamed of babies crying, of dark water closing over my head, of David, as a small boy asking why his father was always disappointed in him. I woke gasping, the sheets tangled around me like seaweed, trying to drag me down. Would you be able to face the person who raised you with love only to discover they'd conspired to destroy you? What would you say to your own child who had chosen money over your life? The next morning, we met Sarah Reynolds at a small cafe near Salem Station. She was in her early 30s, hair tied back in a practical ponytail, eyes constantly scanning the room as if expecting trouble. "Thank you for meeting us," Marcus said. Sarah nodded tightly. "I shouldn't be here. If they find out I'm talking to you—" "Who are they?" Josephine asked. Chesapeake Family Health, Alexis Morgan, the whole network. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she cupped her coffee mug. They make you sign NDAs that would bankrupt you if you breach them. Yet you're here, I observed. Sarah looked at me directly for the first time. Some things matter more than money or legal threats. What happened to Jenny Lewis was wrong, criminal. Tell us about Jenny, Marcus prompted gently. Sarah took a deep breath. Jenny Lewis was 18 from West Virginia. Smart girl, wanted to go to college but couldn't afford it. She signed up with the Institute's private heritage program as a surrogate. The money was good enough to pay for a full college education. What is the private heritage program exactly, I asked. Officially, it's a high-end surrogacy service for wealthy clients who want complete privacy. No names on public records, no connection to the surrogate. Everything handled through the Institute and legal intermediaries. And unofficially, Josephine pressed. Sarah glanced around nervously. Unofficially, it's a way for rich people to get babies without questions. Some of the surrogates are barely adults. Many don't fully understand what they're agreeing to. The clients remain anonymous even to the medical staff most of the time. What happened to Jenny Lewis? Marcus asked. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She was caring for a wealthy couple. The pregnancy was normal, healthy. Blood pressure, heart rate, all the markers were good. She was due in early October. 3 weeks ago. I said, the timing aligning perfectly with my accident and the baby's appearance. Sarah nodded. The night she went into labor, I was on shift. Everything was progressing normally until Dr. Hoffman came in. He said he needed to administer a routine injection to support labor. I questioned it because it wasn't in Jenny's chart, but he dismissed me. Sarah paused, swallowing hard. 20 minutes later, Jenny started seizing. Then her heart stopped. They tried to revive her, but... She shook her head. The baby was delivered by emergency C-section. Healthy girl, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. And the couple? Marcus asked quietly. They came to collect the baby the next morning. I never saw them clearly. Hospital policy kept surrogates and clients separated, but I heard the woman call the man D. When they signed the final papers, I glimpsed the initials D and V. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone in the cafe could hear it. David and Victoria, D and V. What happened after Jenny died? Josephine asked. The official report said obstetric complications, but there was nothing complicated about Jenny's case until that injection. The next day, the Institute director had everyone sign new NDAs specifically about Jenny's case. That's when I knew something was wrong. I quit a week later. Do you know what happened to Jenny's body? Marcus asked. The Institute handled it, said they contacted her family, but I tried calling the number in her file later, and it was disconnected. A cold certainty settled in my stomach. They didn't just take my life, I said quietly. They took hers too. Sarah looked at me confused. I'm sorry, who are you? Why are you investigating this? I exchanged a glance with Josephine, who nodded slightly. My name is Margaret Williams. 3 weeks ago, my son David and his wife Victoria tried to kill me by pushing me off a yacht. They needed me dead so they could claim my fortune, and they needed Jenny's baby as their heir to access the full inheritance. Sarah's face drained of color. Oh my God. The baby you saw, I continued, the one in my house, that's Jenny's daughter. They murdered Jenny for her baby, Sarah whispered. And they tried to murder you for your money. And they're going to get away with both unless we can prove what they've done, Marcus said. As we left the cafe, the weight of what we'd learned settled over us. This wasn't just about me anymore. A young woman had died. Her baby had been taken. How many others had fallen victim to this network of predators? We need more evidence, Marcus said as we drove back to Harbor Light Inn. Sarah's testimony is powerful, but without medical records or official documentation of what really happened to Jenny, it could be dismissed as hearsay. What about the baby? I asked. DNA testing could prove she's not David and Victoria's biological child. That would require getting access to the baby, Josephine pointed out. And right now, we can't even prove you're alive, let alone get a court order for DNA testing. There has to be a way, I insisted. I can't let them get away with this. Not just for my sake, but for Jenny Lewis and her child. Back at the inn, Elena had news of her own. "While you were gone, I did some digging," she said. "I asked around about similar cases, elderly people with substantial assets who died unexpectedly after children or relatives showed concern about their mental capacity." "And," Josephine prompted, "I found 5 cases in the past 3 years just in this region. All followed the same pattern. All had documents processed by Morgan and Associates. All had medical evaluations from doctors affiliated with Chesapeake Family Health." "It's a system," Marcus said grimly, "a well-oiled machine for eliminating inconvenient elders and transferring their assets." "We need to get inside my house again," I said suddenly. "The baby's there, the evidence is there, and I need to know who's caring for Jenny's child." "That's too dangerous," Josephine objected. "They already tried to kill you once." "But they think they succeeded," I pointed out. "They won't be expecting me." Marcus considered this. "Actually, there might be a way. I've been monitoring their movements. David and Victoria leave the house every Tuesday from about 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They go to the Morgan and Associates office, presumably to handle the ongoing legal work of your estate." 4 hours, I said. "That's enough time to get in, find what we need, and get out." "You're not going alone," Josephine stated firmly. "That's non-negotiable." "No," I agreed. "I'll need help. And we'll need to be prepared to document everything we find." We spent the next 5 days planning every detail. Marcus set up surveillance on my house, confirming the Tuesday pattern. He also prepared recording devices and cameras. Josephine mapped out the fastest escape routes. Elena reached out to her network, ensuring we had safe places to go if things went wrong. I thought constantly about Jenny Lewis, barely more than a girl who had died, so that my son and his wife could complete their scheme. I thought about her baby now in their care, an innocent pawn in their greedy game. What would they tell that child as she grew up? What lies would they spin about her origins? When Tuesday came, I was ready. I dressed simply in clothes Elena had provided, my hair covered by a scarf, sunglasses hiding my eyes. Marcus dropped me off a block from the house, then took up position in a van with surveillance equipment. At precisely 10:15 a.m., I watched David's car pull out of the driveway with him and Victoria inside. I waited 15 minutes more, then approached the house from the side entrance. The key still worked. Inside the house was quiet except for faint music coming from upstairs. I moved cautiously through the familiar rooms, now rendered strange by the changes they had made. In the living room, large portraits of David and Victoria had replaced family photos. In the dining room, Harold's antique china cabinet was gone, replaced by something sleek and modern. It was as if they were systematically erasing any trace of the life Harold and I had built. As I approached the stairs, I heard soft singing from above, a woman's voice, gentle and soothing. I climbed slowly, careful to avoid the creaky step, and followed the sound to the guest bedroom. The door was partially open. Inside, a young woman sat in a rocking chair holding the baby. She was perhaps 30, with blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face kind but tired. I took a deep breath and pushed the door fully open. The woman looked up, startled. "I'm sorry, can I help you?" I removed my sunglasses. "I think perhaps I can help you. My name is Margaret Williams. I'm David's mother and the grandmother of the baby you're holding." Her eyes widened in shock, and she clutched the baby tighter. "That's impossible, you're dead. I attended your funeral." "As you can see, reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," I said, stepping into the room, "and I need to talk to you right now about that baby and where she came from." "I don't understand," the woman stammered. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams said you died in a boating accident." "They lied," I said simply. "They pushed me off that boat intending for me to drown, just like they lied about where this baby came from." The woman stared at me, her face pale. "Who are you really?" "I told you who I am. The question is, who are you, and what do you know about this child?" She hesitated. "My name is Megan Wilson. I'm a nursing student. I was hired as a night nurse for the baby 3 weeks ago." "What did they tell you about the baby's birth?" Megan's eyes darted nervously to the door. "That Mrs. Williams had a private birth for security reasons. That they didn't want the media knowing about the baby because of the family's prominence. And you believed that, despite never seeing Victoria pregnant, Megan faltered. I needed the job. The pay is very good and it's helping me through nursing school. I didn't think it was my place to question. I softened my approach, seeing the genuine confusion in her eyes. Megan, I'm not here to cause trouble for you, but that baby you're holding isn't David and Victoria's biological child. Her mother was a young woman named Jenny Lewis. She died giving birth 3 weeks ago under suspicious circumstances. No, Megan whispered. That can't be true. From my pocket, I took the photograph that Sarah had given us showing Jenny Lewis in her hospital bed, smiling tiredly at the camera, her pregnant belly prominent. This is Jenny, I said, holding out the photo. She was 18 years old. She wanted to go to college. She agreed to be a surrogate, but something went wrong during the delivery. She died, and David and Victoria took her baby. Megan looked at the photo, then at the baby in her arms. I could see her professional assessment, the baby's features, compared to the young woman in the picture. Oh my God, she breathed. What are they going to do with her? Use her as an heir to claim my fortune, I said. That's why they needed me dead and needed a baby with William's blood to access the full inheritance. Megan's arms tightened protectively around the baby. What are you going to do? First, I need your help. I need you to document everything you see and hear in this house. Everything David and Victoria say about the baby, about me, about their plans. You want me to spy on them? Megan asked, her voice shaking. I want you to help me protect this child and get justice for her mother, I corrected, and for me. Megan looked down at the sleeping baby, then back at me. If what you're saying is true, this is monstrous. It is, I agreed. And there's evidence suggesting they've done this to others. Elderly people with assets, young women like Jenny. This is bigger than just my family. A long moment passed as Megan considered everything I told her. Finally, she nodded. What do you need me to do? My shoulders sagged in relief. A man named Marcus will be here shortly to install some recording devices. Small, undetectable. You'll need to act normally, continue caring for the baby, but document everything you can. Times they leave people who visit conversations about finances or legal matters. I can do that, Megan said. For her. She looked down at the baby. What's her real name? They call her Rebecca, but I don't know what name Jenny would have chosen, I admitted, but I think we should honor both of them. Perhaps Hope Jenny. Hope for the future Jenny, for the mother she'll never know. Megan's eyes filled with tears. Hope Jenny, it's beautiful. The sound of a car door closing outside made us both freeze. Is someone expected? I asked urgently. Megan shook her head. No, they're supposed to be gone until 2. I need to go, I said, moving toward the door. Marcus will contact you. Be careful, Megan. These people are dangerous. Wait, Megan called softly. Take this. She handed me a small USB drive from her pocket. I keep a daily log of everything about the baby feedings, sleep patterns, medications. I was doing it for my nursing practicum, but there might be something useful there. I took the drive, touched by her immediate willingness to help. Thank you. I slipped out of the room and down the back stairs, exiting through the kitchen, just as I heard the front door open. Outside, I moved quickly through the garden to the street where Marcus waited in his van. We have a problem, he said as I climbed in. That's not David and Victoria who just arrived. It's someone else, someone I recognize from my research. He showed me the surveillance camera feed on his laptop. A woman in an expensive suit was entering my house, her face partially visible. That's Alexis Morgan, Marcus said grimly, the attorney at the center of all this, and she's here outside of their regular meeting time. Something's happening. Back at Harbor Light Inn, we reviewed the footage Marcus had captured and the USB drive Megan had given me. The log was meticulous, noting every aspect of the baby's care, but what caught our attention were Megan's observations about phone calls and visitors, all carefully documented with times and descriptions. Look at this, Josephine said, pointing to an entry from 3 days ago. Victoria received a call that upset her. She mentioned someone named Jason Reed coming from New York. Jason Reed, Marcus repeated, typing the name into his laptop. Let me check. Yes, here he is. Jason Reed is what you might call a cleaner in certain wealthy circles. He handles post-event problems for financial elites, makes messy situations disappear. Why would they need someone like that now? Elena asked. They think Margaret is dead. The baby is established in their home. What mess is left to clean up? A cold realization dawned on me. They're tying up loose ends. Sarah Reynolds, the nurse who talked to us. Jenny Lewis's family. Anyone who might ask questions. Marcus nodded grimly. That would be standard procedure for an operation like this. Eliminate all connections, all witnesses. We need to warn Sarah, I said urgently. Already on it. Marcus assured me, typing rapidly on his phone. I'm having her moved to a safe location tonight. What about Jenny's family? Josephine asked. Do they even know she's dead? According to Sarah, the Institute claimed they notified the family, but given everything else they've lied about... Marcus trailed off. We need to find them, chum, I decided. Jenny's parents deserve to know the truth about their daughter and about their granddaughter. I'll start searching, Marcus promised. But we need to be careful. If Morgan and this Reed character are actively cleaning house, we're all in danger. That evening, as wind from the bay rattled the windows of Harbor Light Inn, I sat at the small desk in my room, writing by hand a letter I wasn't sure I would ever send. Dear Alexis Morgan, I began, the woman you thought dead is still alive and she has read every report of Project Margaret. I suggest you review the file of patient Jenny Lewis before the court receives a copy from me. I am not seeking justice only for myself, but for that girl and for her child, Hope Jenny. See you on the side of justice. I folded the letter, slid it into a white envelope, and sealed it with wax Elena had provided. It was old-fashioned dramatic, perhaps, but I wanted Morgan to feel the weight of physical evidence, to know that somewhere out there a ghost was watching. Are you sure about this? Josephine asked when I showed her the letter. Revealing that you're alive removes your greatest advantage. Sometimes the most powerful move is letting your opponent know you're still in the game, I replied. Besides, they'll discover the truth soon enough. Better on our terms than theirs. Marcus agreed to place the letter on Morgan's desk next Monday morning, when her office would be empty for their weekly staff meeting. A small act of psychological warfare against a woman who had helped orchestrate my murder. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about Hope Jenny sleeping in what used to be my home, unaware of the darkness surrounding her birth, the schemes and deaths that had preceded her existence, an innocent child caught in a web of adult greed. I thought of my own son David, the boy I had raised with such love, now a stranger capable of watching his mother drown without lifting a finger to save her. What had happened to that sensitive child? Had he always harbored this capacity for betrayal, or had Victoria's influence corrupted him completely? And I thought of Harold, my partner of 45 years, the brilliant, difficult man who had foreseen the potential for trouble and tried to protect me through his legal arrangements. People show you who they are eventually, Margaret, he used to say. The trick is paying attention when they do. I hadn't paid attention. I had been blind to the changes in David, deaf to Harold's warnings about Victoria, unwilling to see the machinery of betrayal being assembled around me. But now my eyes were wide open. As I drifted toward sleep, I made a silent promise to 3 people to Jenny Lewis that her death would not go unpunished. To Hope Jenny that she would grow up knowing both the truth and love, and to myself that I would reclaim not just my fortune and my name, but my dignity and power. The wind outside grew stronger, rain beginning to patter against the windows. A storm was coming to Chesapeake Bay, and so was I. Have you ever stood at the edge of a major confrontation, knowing that once you step forward, nothing will ever be the same? What gives you the courage to take that step when everything is at risk? The Chesapeake Bay wind carried damp and cold through Harbor Light Inn's windows as morning broke. I sat in the corner of my room, listening to the waves beating against the rocks below my heart, strangely calm. Today was the day of the inheritance procedure, when David, Victoria, and Alexis Morgan would finalize my death on paper. It was also the day they would realize that the dead woman could still fight back. The letter I had written 3 days ago had been delivered by Marcus precisely at 8:15 that morning. By now, Alexis Morgan would have returned from her morning coffee to find it centered on her pristine desk. I imagined her manicured fingers breaking the wax seal, her eyes widening as she read my words. I pictured the color draining from her face as she realized their perfect plan had a critical flaw. I was still alive. "Ready?" Josephine asked, entering my room with a steaming cup of coffee. I nodded, accepting the cup. "As ready as I'll ever be to confront my would-be killers." "The recording equipment is all in place," she said, sitting opposite me. "Marcus spent half the night ensuring everything will capture crystal clear audio and video. Every word they say will be documented." "And Megan, is she safe?" "She took the baby to the panic room in the basement as planned. Walter is waiting in the alley behind the house in case they need emergency extraction." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what we were about to do. This wasn't just about my justice anymore. It was about Jenny Lewis, about Hope Jenny, about who knows how many other victims of this network. "You don't have to do this in person," Josephine reminded me gently. "We have enough evidence to take to the authorities." I shook my head. "No, they need to see me. They need to look into the eyes of the woman they tried to kill. Besides, the authorities might dismiss our evidence as circumstantial without a direct confession." My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Movement at Morgan's office. All 3 subjects leaving in a hurry. ETA to Williams' residence approximately 20 minutes. "It's time," I said, rising from my chair. I wore the deep blue dress Harold had given me on our 40th anniversary. It was perhaps overly dramatic, but there was power in symbolism. This dress represented everything they had tried to take from me: my marriage, my memories, my very identity. Marcus picked us up in his unmarked car, his expression tense. "The recording devices are active," he confirmed. "Elena will monitor the audio feed from here. I'll be parked across the street with surveillance equipment. Joe will be in position by the garden entrance." The drive to my former home felt surreal. Streets I had traveled for decades now seemed foreign, as if belonging to another lifetime. In a way, they did. The Margaret Williams who had last walked these paths no longer existed. As we approached the house, I saw David's luxury sedan and Morgan's sleek black car already parked in the driveway. My heart rate accelerated, but my resolve remained firm. "Remember," Marcus said as he parked a block away, "if at any point you feel threatened, use the code word lighthouse, and we'll intervene immediately." I nodded, then stepped out into the cool morning air. Walking the final distance to my home, I felt almost weightless, as if I had transcended normal human concerns. There is a strange freedom in having lost everything you discover what truly matters. The front door still had my key hidden beneath the potted orchid. Some habits it seemed even David couldn't break. I let myself in silently, hearing raised voices from the living room. "This is impossible," Victoria was saying, her voice higher than normal. "She's dead. We watched her go under." "Then explain this," Alexis Morgan snapped back. I could hear paper rustling my letter. "Someone knows everything. Someone who claims to be Margaret Williams." "It has to be a trick," David insisted. "Someone trying to extort us. Maybe that fisherman saw something that night." I chose that moment to enter. Standing in the doorway of what had once been my living room, I watched as 3 heads snapped toward me in perfect synchronicity. Victoria's mouth fell open in a silent scream. David stumbled backward, nearly falling over an end table. Alexis Morgan, whom I recognized from photos Marcus had shown me, clutched her designer briefcase like a shield. "Hello," I said calmly. "I believe you were discussing me." The silence that followed was absolute. Time seemed suspended as they stared at me, the ghost they had tried to drown, now flesh and blood before them. Victoria recovered first. "Oh my God," she gasped. "How? You're dead. We saw you." "Saw me what, Victoria?" I asked, stepping fully into the room. "Struggling in the water after you pushed me, disappearing beneath the waves while my own son watched and did nothing." David had gone ghostly pale. "Mom," he whispered the word barely audible. "Don't call me that," I said coldly. "You forfeited the right to call me mother when you chose to watch me die." Alexis Morgan's legal training was evident in how quickly she tried to regain control of the situation. "Mrs. Williams," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious shock. This is quite a surprise. We were led to believe you had suffered a tragic accident. Accident. I laughed without humor. Is that what we're calling attempted murder now? How convenient. I moved to Harold's old armchair and sat down, arranging my dress carefully. The blue fabric pooled around me, a reminder of better times, of the man who had loved me honestly. If this is some cruel joke, Alexis began. No joke, Ms. Morgan. I cut her off. Just reality. And the cruel thing is the plans you wrote. I pointed to her briefcase. Inside is the Project Margaret file, isn't it? I've read it all. The fabricated mental decline, the fake medical reports, the carefully planned accident. Oh, and let's not forget the death of Jenny Lewis to provide you with a convenient heir. At the mention of Jenny Lewis, all three faces showed different variations of shock. Victoria's eyes widened in panic, David looked confused and frightened, and Alexis, most tellingly, went completely still. I don't know what you're talking about, Alexis said carefully. No. Then perhaps I should refresh your memory. I reached into my purse and removed a folder of my own. Project Margaret Phase 1. Create medical profile suggesting cognitive decline. Phase 2. Secure asset authority. Phase 3. Boating accident. And Phase 4, which you were about to complete today, court declares incapacity, posthumously finalizing inheritance. I laid out photocopies of the documents I had taken from Harold's office. Your handwriting is distinctive, Ms. Morgan, as are your initials on every approval. David turned to Alexis, panic evident in his eyes. What is she talking about? What files? Keats? She's confused, Alexis said smoothly. These could be fabricated documents. Confused, I repeated. That's been your narrative for months, hasn't it? Poor confused Margaret losing her grip on reality. So convenient when you need to justify stealing someone's fortune. A thin cry rose from somewhere in the house, hoped Jenny, awakening from her nap. Victoria flinched at the sound, her eyes darting nervously toward the stairs. Ah, yes, I said. The baby. The final piece of your plan. You needed an heir to access the full Williams fortune since Harold's will specified grandchildren as the ultimate beneficiaries. David's face showed genuine bewilderment. What are you talking about? Rebecca is our daughter. Rebecca, I shook my head. Her name is Hope Jenny, named for the mother who died giving birth to her. Jenny Lewis, the 18-year-old girl who thought she was helping a childless couple not providing an heir for murderers. Victoria's composure cracked. Shut up. You don't know anything. I know everything, Victoria. I've spoken with Sarah Reynolds, the nurse who was present when Jenny died after receiving an injection that wasn't in her chart. I know about the $220,000 payment to Chesapeake Family Health Institute. I know this wasn't just about me. It's a system you've used before, targeting elderly people with assets, fabricating mental decline, arranging accidents. Alexis Morgan's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing fear. These are serious accusations without evidence. I smiled coldly. Oh, I have evidence. Every word in this room is being recorded. The documents have been copied and distributed to multiple secure locations, and Megan Wilson has been documenting everything she's seen and heard in this house for the past week. At the mention of Megan, Victoria gasped. The nurse? She's been spying for you. She's been documenting the truth, I corrected. About the baby, about your conversations regarding my estate, about the call concerning someone named Jason Reed coming from New York to handle cleanup. The mention of Reed's name hit a nerve. Alexis glanced sharply at Victoria, who had the decency to look alarmed that I knew this detail. You're making wild accusations, Alexis said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Then explain why Jenny Lewis's death was ruled obstetric complications when she had a perfectly healthy pregnancy. Explain why her family was never properly notified. Explain why a birth certificate for Rebecca Williams was expedited through your law firm when Victoria was never pregnant. David looked increasingly distressed, turning to Victoria. What is she talking about? You said the surrogate process was all legal, that the birth mother had voluntarily given up her rights. Victoria's face hardened. Don't be naive, David. We needed an heir to access the trust. Your father made sure you couldn't control the assets without a child. But you said... David trailed off, the full horror of what had happened seemingly dawning on him for the first time. "Your wife lied," I said to my son, "about the baby, about me, about everything. The question is, how much did you know?" David shook his head, looking lost. "I knew we needed to have you declared incompetent. Victoria said it was for your own good that you were declining mentally. The doctors confirmed it. But I didn't know about Jenny Lewis. I didn't know Victoria planned to push you off the boat. It was supposed to be just a scare tactic to get you to sign the papers." "Liar," Victoria hissed at him. "You were there. You watched. You did nothing to stop it." "Because I was drugged," David shot back. "You put something in my drink, not Mom's. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. I could barely stand." This revelation sent a shock through me. Had David truly been as much a victim as I was, the memory of his vacant expression as I fell suddenly made more sense. Not callousness, but drug-induced helplessness. Alexis Morgan seemed to sense the alliance fracturing. "Enough," she said sharply. "This proves nothing. Mrs. Williams, if you take these wild accusations public, you'll face substantial defamation lawsuits." I leaned forward, looking directly at her. "Ms. Morgan, let me be clear. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to inform you that your operation is finished. The FBI has been provided with evidence of your involvement in multiple suspicious deaths, fraudulent legal proceedings, and medical malpractice." "You're bluffing," she said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Am I?" "Tell me, how many clients have you helped access inheritances early? How many elderly people with cognitive decline have suffered convenient accidents after your firm handled their paperwork?" A flash of genuine fear crossed Morgan's face. "I only followed protocols," she said, voice lowered. "The medical assessments came from licensed physicians. The legal framework was sound." "Sound for murder and theft," I replied. "How many, Alexis?" She swallowed. 39 cases resolved, she said finally, her voice clinical despite the monstrous admission. "All legally documented with medical and legal sign-offs, none prosecuted." Victoria made a small triumphant sound. "See, all legal. You've got nothing." I turned to her feeling a mix of disgust and pity. Legal like paying cash to a fertility clinic for expedited services, like swapping a birth certificate, like hiring someone to stage a boating accident for your mother-in-law, all nice and legal. David gripped the chair arms, face ashen. "Oh God, what have we done?" "Not we," I said. "Victoria and Alexis. The question is, what are you going to do now, David?" Before he could answer, Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at it, then paled visibly. "I need to take this," she mumbled, stepping toward the hallway. "Stay where you are," I commanded, surprised by the authority in my own voice. "Your cleaner can wait." Victoria froze, then slowly turned back. "How do you know who's calling? Jason Reed coming to tie up loose ends to make sure Sarah Reynolds can't testify about what happened to Jenny Lewis. Maybe to handle the inconvenient problem of Megan knowing too much about the baby." The baby's cry rose again, more insistent this time. From somewhere in the house, a door opened and we heard footsteps on the stairs. "Victoria!" Alexis hissed. "Control this situation!" Victoria's face transformed calculation, replacing fear. "Margaret," she said, voice suddenly gentle, reasonable. "We can work this out. Whatever you want, money the house back, regular visits with Rebecca. There's no need for this to become a legal nightmare." "It's far beyond that," I replied. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a reckoning." At that moment, the door to the living room opened and Megan appeared with Hope Jenny in her arms. The baby had stopped crying, her tiny face flushed from tears, but now calm in Megan's capable hands. "Margaret," Megan said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "I heard everything. I've been recording too." She held up her phone. "Including Victoria's call last night to this Reed person discussing how to handle me once I was no longer needed." Victoria lunged toward Megan. "Give me my daughter." "She's not your daughter," Megan said, stepping back, "and I'm not letting you near her." "This is absurd," Alexis snapped. "That child legally belongs to the Williamses." "Based on fraudulent paperwork you processed," I countered. Suddenly, the sound of a police siren wailed outside, then abruptly cut off. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. "What did you do?" Victoria demanded, panic rising in her voice. "I didn't call them," I said truthfully, "but it seems someone did." Marcus's voice came through the hidden speaker system he had installed. "FBI agents are approaching the house. Stay where you are." Victoria made a desperate dash for the back door, but Josephine was already there, blocking her path. "Going somewhere?" Jo asked, her former police authority evident in her stance. The front door opened with a sharp crack as FBI agents entered, led by a woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense expression. "Alexis Morgan, Victoria Williams, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and medical malpractice," she announced. As agents read Miranda rights and applied handcuffs, I remained seated in Harold's chair, watching the scene unfold with an odd sense of detachment. Justice was arriving, but it brought no joy, only a heavy recognition of how much had been lost to reach this moment. David was handcuffed as well, though the lead agent, who introduced herself as Special Agent Jennifer Wilson, approached me afterward. "Mrs. Williams, your cooperation has been invaluable. Your son's involvement will need to be fully investigated, but his testimony about being drugged will be taken into consideration." I nodded, watching as David was led away. Despite everything, a mother's heart still ached at seeing her child in handcuffs. "The baby," I said to Agent Wilson. "Her name is Hope Jenny. Her mother was Jenny Lewis, an 18-year-old surrogate who died during childbirth under suspicious circumstances. She has family grandparents who don't even know she exists." Agent Wilson nodded. "We'll locate them. In the meantime, the child will need emergency placement." "I can take her," I said without hesitation. "I'm her legal grandmother regardless of how she came to be born, and I promised her mother, a girl I never met, that her daughter would know the truth and be loved." As the agents escorted Victoria and Alexis out, Victoria turned back to me, her face twisted with hatred. "You think you've won. You've ruined everything. We could have had it all." I looked at her calmly. "That was always your mistake, Victoria. Thinking that all meant money and power. It doesn't. It never did." In the following weeks, life reorganized itself with dizzying speed. The FBI investigation expanded rapidly, uncovering a network far larger than even I had suspected. 23 cases across 3 states of elderly people with substantial assets who had died under questionable circumstances after being evaluated by doctors connected to Chesapeake Family Health Institute. All had legal work processed through Morgan and Associates. The most heartbreaking discovery was Jenny Lewis's parents. Marcus located them in a small town in West Virginia. They had been told their daughter had died in a car accident while away at college. They had never known she was pregnant, never known they had a granddaughter. I met them at a small cafe midway between our homes. Mary and John Lewis were simple, honest people. Hard-working and deeply religious, they had raised Jenny with love and values. The pain in their eyes when I told them the truth about their daughter's death was almost unbearable. "She wanted to surprise us," Mary said through tears. "She was going to use the surrogate money to pay for college, then come home and tell us she'd gotten a scholarship. Always trying to make us proud without worrying us." I placed photos of Hope Jenny on the table. "She has Jenny's eyes," I said softly, "and her chin." John Lewis studied the photos, his weathered hands trembling slightly. "Our grandbaby," he whispered. "We didn't even know." "I'd like you to be part of her life," I said. "Jenny should have raised her, but since she can't, I think she would want all of us, her parents and her baby's grandmother, to do it together." The Lewis family became an unexpected blessing in the midst of tragedy. We arranged a shared custody agreement with Hope Jenny, spending time in both homes. She would grow up knowing both sides of her heritage, the simple, loving home Jenny had come from, and the complicated Williams legacy she had inherited. The trial began 3 months later. Victoria maintained her innocence despite overwhelming evidence, but the jury saw through her performance. She was sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Alexis Morgan received 30 years without parole. The extent of her operation shocked even seasoned prosecutors. She had been orchestrating similar schemes for over a decade, targeting wealthy elderly individuals and facilitating their convenient deaths for a percentage of the inheritance. Two doctors from Chesapeake Family Health received 15-year sentences for their roles in falsifying medical reports, and in Jenny's case, administering the injection that killed her. David's case was more complex. While he had been present for my attempted murder, evidence supported his claim that he had been drugged. Combined with his full cooperation with prosecutors and testimony against Victoria and Morgan, he received 5 years of supervised release. I visited him at the rehabilitation center where he was receiving treatment for depression and substance abuse issues that had apparently been part of his life for years, hidden beneath a veneer of success. "I don't deserve forgiveness, Mom," he said during one visit, unable to meet my eyes. "Perhaps not." I agreed. But forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's a choice. And I choose not to let hatred destroy whatever love remains. "I was weak," he admitted, afraid I'd never measure up to Dad's expectations. Victoria promised she could fix everything, make me the successful son he always wanted. "Harold loved you," I said gently, in his own way. He wasn't good at showing it. "Can we start over someday?" he asked hesitantly. "I want Hope Jenny to know her real grandmother, not the fiction Victoria created." "One step at a time," I said. "Trust takes years to build and seconds to break. Rebuilding it will take time." 1 year after my death, I stood on the cliffs overlooking Chesapeake Bay, Hope Jenny bundled against the autumn wind in my arms. Behind me, Mary and John Lewis waited by the car, giving me a moment alone with my thoughts and their granddaughter. The water stretched out endlessly, sunlight dancing across its surface. The same water that had nearly claimed my life now looked peaceful, beautiful even. It struck me as a fitting metaphor for life itself, capable of both destruction and renewal, depending on how you approached it. "Your mother was brave," I whispered to Hope Jenny, who watched me with serious eyes so like Jenny's. "And wherever she is, I know she's proud that you're growing up surrounded by love." The baby reached up her tiny hand, grasping my finger with surprising strength. In that grip, I felt a promise that life continues, that love perseveres, that justice, while imperfect, can still be found if we're brave enough to seek it. With the settlement from the criminal cases and civil suits, I established the Jenny Lewis Foundation, dedicated to protecting vulnerable elders from financial exploitation and supporting young women in need. It wouldn't bring back those who had been lost, but it would create something meaningful from the pain. Eleanor's Harbor Light Inn became the Foundation's first community center, offering free legal advice to seniors and scholarships to young women from disadvantaged backgrounds. Elena ran the daily operations, bringing the same quiet compassion to each person who walked through the door that she had once shown to me. Walter Johnson and his granddaughter Zoe became regular visitors, with Walter teaching fishing skills to Foundation youth programs, and Zoe, now in pre-med studies, mentoring scholarship recipients. Josephine Parker joined the Foundation's board, bringing her law enforcement expertise to develop training programs for police and social workers on recognizing signs of elder exploitation. And Marcus. He continued his private investigation work, but devoted half his time pro bono to the Foundation, using his skills to untangle complex cases of financial abuse that authorities might otherwise miss. As for me, I reclaimed my name, my identity, and my purpose. The woman who had been shoved into the dark waters of Chesapeake Bay had indeed died that night, but the woman who emerged was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to use whatever time remained to her for something meaningful. On Hope Jenny's first birthday, we gathered at the Lewis farm. Mary had baked a cake, John had built a tiny rocking chair, and I had brought a locket containing photos of both Jenny and Harold, the two people who should have been there to see this milestone. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, I stepped away from the celebration for a moment. Looking out over the fields where Jenny had once played, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not happiness, too much had been lost for simple happiness, but something deeper, more enduring. "We did it, Jenny," I whispered to the wind. "Your daughter is safe. She knows who you were. She will always know she was born from love, even if that love was taken advantage of. And the people who hurt you will never hurt anyone else." I thought about the journey that had brought me here from the privileged life I had once led to the cold waters of betrayal, to this moment of quiet triumph. I thought about the countless others who had fallen victim to Morgan's network, whose stories would now be heard and honored. And I thought about the lesson I would make sure Hope Jenny grew up understanding, that age is not weakness, that women are not disposable, that justice, while sometimes slow, is worth fighting for with every breath you have. The sound of laughter drew me back to the gathering. Hope Jenny was being passed from arms to arms, surrounded by people who would protect her with their lives. This makeshift family, created from tragedy, but bound by love, was perhaps the most beautiful legacy of all. I rejoined the celebration, accepting a piece of cake from Mary Lewis, whose eyes still held sadness, but now contained joy as well. "Jenny would have loved this," she said quietly. "Yes," I agreed, "and in a way, she's here to see it." As night fell and stars appeared above the Lewis farm, I made one final silent promise to myself. I would live the rest of my days with purpose and integrity. I would not waste a single moment on bitterness or regret. I would ensure that Harold's legacy and Jenny's memory were honored through Hope Jenny's life. I had been given a second chance that many never receive the opportunity to witness justice, to rebuild what was broken, to create meaning from tragedy. It was a gift I would not squander. "You know," John Lewis said as we stood watching the stars, "the good book says there's a time for everything, a time to mourn and a time to dance." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle into my bones. "I think maybe," he continued, "we're coming to that time to dance." "Yes," I said, looking at Hope Jenny sleeping peacefully in Mary's arms. "I believe we are." Have you ever stood at the crossroads of tragedy and hope? Have you found the courage to rebuild after everything was taken from you? Remember this: it's never too late to reclaim your story. It's never too late to seek justice, to create meaning, to choose love over bitterness. Age isn't weakness. It's strength, wisdom, and the power to recognize what truly matters. And sometimes a single honest word can topple an empire of lies.